The Investigator's Toolbox is here. Are you a licensed investigator, an investigative or security professional? How would you like to gain work-based skills, be more productive, and grow your business? Well, welcome to the investigatorstoolbox.com. Check out this industry-changing website that's pioneering into the future today. You can network with other investigators in our forums. You can take a webinar, check out a blog, or read an article to brush up on your skills. You can visit our vast resource catalog of research websites and bookmark them in your own private library. Everybody's talking about the Investigator's Toolbox. This really is the future of networking, learning, and resource management. Check this out. For a limited time, we're offering a legacy discount for new members. If you sign up early, we'll save you 25%. Take advantage of exclusive discounts from site partners like Crosstracks, DelfPoint, PI Magazine, Hetherington Group, Scope Now, Parabon, and so many more. Just visit the website investigators-toolbox.com and check out the demo video in the Who We Are section. Can you afford 41 cents a day? If the answer is yes, then don't delay. Join the community. investigatorstoolbox.com. These discounts won't last. That's www.investigators-toolbox.com.
Hey everybody, it's Matt. Thanks for tuning in to the program this week. Before we jump in, I want to talk to you a little bit about Crosstracks. Crosstracks is a big-time supporter of the show. They've been on board very early on, and I'm very appreciative for the support they've given. So here's a funny story. I was not a Crosstracks user when we started having discussions about them coming on as a sponsor. So I decided to check them out, and I was using Dropbox and kind of doing my own thing. And I have a good-sized business. We have quite a few law firms we service in New York, and I was like, I don't need this case management stuff. Man, was I mistaken. As soon as I checked this system out and I started really uploading everything and using it on a regular basis, man, it has really increased my productivity. My clients are super stoked that I'm using it because it allows them to actually stay on top of their cases and get regular updates without having to shoot emails or make phone calls. They know exactly what's going on their case, which is something that's absolutely phenomenal. The pricing on it's really reasonable too, and you can build it into your pricing, as like an administrative charge. Tack on a couple bucks to each assignment. Your clients are not going to complain. They're going to understand. They're going to be happy because you're using a management system that allows them to have access to their files. It's worth it. I mean, I've not had one client call me to complain about a minimal administration charge that I've now tacked on to my invoices. So definitely check them out. Consider it. It's crosstracks.co. You'll see the information in the show notes. So if you're not using a case management system, check it out. If you are using a case management system and you don't like what you're doing, or you used to use Crosstracks and you want to come back, give them a call, contact them, tell them you're supporting the show and you want to know a little bit more about what they're offering. So we're going to jump into the program now, and thank you everyone again for tuning in, and please support our sponsors. It really means a lot. So thanks guys, and enjoy the show.
Welcome to this week's episode. Ever wonder about those DNA tests out there? Do you think they're admissible in court? Have you been contacted to find a lost relative and you don't know where to begin? Well, this week's show is for you. Today we welcome Liesa Healy-Miller. Liesa has built an investigation business focusing on these issues. We have lots to cover, so let's dive in with Liesa and your host, private investigator Matt Spaier.
Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of PI Perspectives. This week we're in for a treat. I actually was able to reach out to somebody I've known for quite some time. Somebody who does something a little bit different. She gets into genealogy and retracing steps of people, right? A forensic genealogist, I guess is what you call it. So today's guest is Liesa Healy-Miller. And Liesa, I want to welcome you to the program. How are you?
Thanks, Matt. Great to be here.
Okay, did I say that right? Forensic genealogist? Is that the right description for you?
That is correct.
Okay. All right, cool. So you and I have known each other for quite a few years, right? We met through the Society of Professional Investigators.
Yes.
And I believe you're also a member of ALDENIS, which is the Licensed Investigators Association for New York State. And
Yes.
we've chatted over the years, and I've just been fascinated by what you do. So tell me a little bit about your background, exactly what you do and how you got into this business.
Sure. When you say forensic genealogy, I'll set apart for your listeners how that differs from sort of just genealogy or mainstream genealogy. This is genealogy with a legal, practical focus. With all due respect to genealogy for hobbyists, tracing your own family, which is how I started and how everyone starts,
Right.
This is a little bit different. This is genealogy for legal purposes. And that means identifying a person, proving their identity for the purpose of a legal case. Now, that can be identifying an individual in an adoption case. Most often the ones I work on are heir search cases where someone has died and there is a will or there is no will, and we have funds that by law need to be dispersed, or possibly clearing up a title on a piece of property. So tracing it down through the subsequent owners and then finding their descendants, finding out who would be entitled to or who owns that piece of property so that it can be sold or repurposed or what have you.
Okay, so you're based out of Boston, correct?
Yes, I am, just outside of Boston.
So how has COVID affected your ability to do what you do?
COVID has affected what I do to some extent. Thankfully, a fair number of the records I need to look at, historical records, are online, so I can do that from my office. Unfortunately, a lot of repositories are closed, so if I need to look at historical documents or get access to vital records, a lot of that has been shut off. And as we all know, any PI who has had to deal with a legal case, the courthouses have been closed.
Right.
And they've been slowly starting to open up. So it has slowed down the process somewhat. On the flip side, because sadly so many people have died from COVID, there are now some cases where the heirs need to be identified. So I do have attorneys reaching out to me to help identify heirs and move the cases along.
Yeah, I've actually seen a big uptick in that in New York for me, right? So you know, even attorneys I work with have family members that have died, and they're trying to put the pieces together.
Yes.
And there's a wife that's been the wife only for about 3 or 4 years, and the kids are now fighting with the new wife over the estate, and they're trying to figure out what's what. It's been a mess. So definitely have seen the uptick in that too. And I unfortunately, I mean, I think you're going to see the trend there, and there's going to be some fraud related issues too, potentially that could be popping up. So interesting times we live in, right?
Absolutely. Although I would say in the states that I've dealt with, which mainly I've handled cases in Massachusetts and New York, the law is crystal clear. This is an interesting point you raised, Matt, because the law is crystal clear in terms of who inherits. I worked on a case once. The estranged daughter of quite a wealthy man who lived in Manhattan was set to inherit all this money when he died, and various friends of his did not want this daughter to have the money or didn't think she was entitled to it because, they haven't spoken in years and so forth. Doesn't matter. The law, as you know, is quite clear that if this is the closest living relation, this is who the money goes to. Doesn't matter if they may have never even met the person, but if this is a first cousin and that's the only person left surviving, that's the person that gets the money according to the law.
Yeah, it is what it is, right?
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about your background. I mean, you had mentioned you started doing research on your own family, but what is your educational background, and when did you become an investigator, and how'd you get to that point?
Well, it's related and it's not related. I have people say, well, how did you get into this? Because I actually started as a broadcast journalist.
Oh, wow.
I graduated with a degree in English literature from University of Massachusetts at Boston. Wanted in the worst way to be a television reporter, so just did tons of internships, got my foot in the door, and worked at TV stations as a reporter in Rhode Island and in Boston. After about 15 years and also doing some producing for national shows, I had my fill of that, 15 or 20 years of that, and felt like I had done all I could do with it and wasn't really sure where I was going next. And there's a branch of my family tree that I really never knew much about my dad's family, and I just started researching as a hobby and got fascinated by that, and subsequently thought, well, can this be a profession? So I took an excellent course, which I would highly recommend to anybody out there who wants to get some professional training in genealogy. And that is a course at Boston University, which is a certificate in genealogical studies. And I attended for 6 months, and that put me on my path.
Right.
And then a subset of that was a forensic genealogy. And I was just so taken with that immediately, because as much as I enjoy the work as a hobbyist, the thought of actually doing this as a practical application, as something that can influence someone's life, that can help someone answer a question,
Sure.
that can assist an attorney, that was very attractive to me.
Yeah, and it's almost like that problem solving, right? Getting the answer, that obsession with, I got to figure this out, and whatever it takes to get it done. I think the error search it's one of the most difficult things to do, because you're really counting on someone to be forthright with you too, right? When you're interviewing somebody, you're really going off the information they're giving you, and you don't know if it's legitimate, right? You're taking it on face, and now you have to, you got to vet it, and you got to see if it's actually there. So it's definitely very challenging.
Oh, absolutely. And I think you and I and all investigators, in order to do what we do, we all have that curiosity gene. It's more of an obsession, right. I'd say. It's like, how does this work? How do I get to the bottom of this? How do I get the answers I need? So, yes, we start by interviewing people about their family, but you can't take that as an absolute, because I've had this happen, or colleagues have had this happen, where names of certain relatives have been withheld. Oh, yeah. Well, hey, I have 7 siblings, but if I only give out my name and my sister's name, then we'll inherit the lion's share. No, doesn't work that way. We start out interviewing, but then everything has to be documented. So you can't take anybody's word for it, as you say. Healthy dose of skepticism there. Yeah,
and then you have your sibling that died, or is in jail or something. Like they conveniently forget about that one. I forgot about George. Yeah, and he's got 3 kids. Yeah, but he's dead, so I didn't think that mattered.
That's exactly right. And his children, under the law, would be certainly entitled to inherit. And then of course you get the argument, well, his kids never met Uncle so-and-so. Doesn't matter. Under the law, they are entitled to inherit.
Right. So do you do a lot of testifying in court?
I have done it, yes. It depends. If it's in New York State and in Massachusetts, those are the states I can speak of. It's probably similar in most states. In a case where there is no will, that's where you need to go and testify. When there is a will, we still have to sometimes, if there isn't anybody obvious to inherit, such as children or siblings, we do have to track down to the level of first cousin or first cousin once removed. And that can usually, when there is a will, you can submit a sworn affidavit to the court, and that's fine. But in a case where there is no will, that is when I have been called in to testify.
Right. I know, like, one of the challenges I used to deal with a lot, I was doing a lot of field work, was the citation waivers, right? Getting those signed and convincing somebody, hey, this proceeding is taking place. So-and-so has made a petition. If you think you're better than this person, here's the date you got to go to court, or can you sign this thing, please, so we can get this thing filled. Oh, what a challenge. What a real challenge.
Yes.
To get stuff done.
Thankfully, I don't have to do that. The attorney's offices have dealt with that, so I'm very glad I don't have to do that.
Oh, God, it stinks. It's the worst. You want to talk about using Jedi mind trick at times.
Yeah, exactly. When you bring that up, the Jedi mind trick I have to use, speaking in that vein, is to convince someone you're not a scam artist.
Yes.
So I am right now doing one case that deals with an exceptionally large family, and I may find one sibling, and I'm trying to find the others, and can't find evidence, can't find written records. So you say, can you please identify these cousins or these siblings? Or they don't even want to identify themselves because they think it's a scam, and rightly so.
Yeah. Rightly
so. So you have to, convince them that you're honest. I point them to my website,
sure,
so they know I'm not calling from out of the country. And I found that a letter with letterhead often does the trick. For some reason, they'll take that more seriously than just my voice on the phone.
Yeah, and I think the way you carry yourself too makes a difference, right? Talking with authority, and just having that calm, cool voice, and not being argumentative with somebody. Just saying, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. I need your help, right? Now I'm inserting you in the story. I'm making you VIP.
Exactly.
I need you to help me get this done, right?
And since I'm working for attorneys, I always refer them back to the attorney.
Sure.
Please call Attorney Smith. Call that office, verify that that I'm a real person working for Attorney Smith, and then usually they're fine.
Before we take a break, you reminded me of a story of one of the cases I worked on many years ago. So I had this gal I was trying to track down for a surrogate's matter. Her mother had actually died. She had no idea, and she was in a shelter, which was a huge challenge. Right, I was able to find out she was actually in a woman's shelter, but getting her to communicate with me was really difficult. And finally, I don't remember how I did it, but we were able to actually made contact, and she comes out of the shelter and she comes to talk to me. I'm like, hey, this is what I'm here about. She goes, I thought you were trying to serve me with divorce papers. I was like, no, you're actually entitled to some money. Like, this is a good call. So
good dodge. You should have had her come work for you.
Yeah. It was funny. So we're going to take a quick break, and we got so much stuff to jump into. I'm really excited that we were able to get you on the phone here, because it's fascinating and really fascinating. So, all right, everybody, sit tight. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back.
The next issue of PI Magazine is hot off the presses. Make sure you visit PIMagazine.com for all the details. Check out Matt's columns on Podcasting 101 and PI Perspectives. Check out the PI Institute of Education at PIinstitute.com. Since 1989, Kelly Riddle has been teaching on subjects such as surveillance, nursing home investigations, insurance fraud, domestic investigations, hidden assets, and accident scene investigations. The PI Institute of Education is a featured learning partner in the investigatorstoolbox.com. Check out the free content on the site, then visit the Institute for more great savings on additional classes.
And welcome back to PI Perspectives. This is Matt Spaier, your host. Today we are here with Liesa Healy-Miller from Healy-Miller Associates out of Boston. Liesa, welcome back to the program.
Great to be here.
Amazing. You were talking about your television and writing and going down that way. I got to say, you have no New England accent. It's amazing. You're like perfect for radio and TV.
And that's why I knew when someone said, you sound like you're from Iowa, I had it down. I actually self-trained. I made myself lose my accent. Sometimes it creeps through. If I'm very tired, I've had a few cocktails. You may hear it some night.
All right. So far, we're good.
All right.
we're good tonight. Okay, so let's jump in here. Let's get into this. So what do you think that are some of the most major mistakes that an investigator makes when they're approaching this air search, trying to do things on their own?
Well, good question. I think that if the case is in the United States solely, it can be easier for them to tackle if they don't have a formal genealogy background. I say it can be easier because sometimes you will get a common name like O'Brien. Right. Well, how do you, if you're going back and you have to document this person's grandparents, because we have to document the family tree, right, to see how all of these people who are still living, who can inherit, how do they relate to this person who died? So, I invite anyone to go on Ancestry.com and look up John O'Brien in New York City. Good luck with that. You'll get 25,000 results. Right. I think
they're
it's
all
best.
cops.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
I think it's good for investigators to familiarize themselves with at least some basic principles. If they don't want to do a deep dive and take a 6-month course at Boston University, that's fine. Right. But I do think that they could take some online courses. There are a number of good ones out there that are very affordable. And just think about how to distinguish those records one from the next. So we have to check that this person's age lines up as we check him in the censuses for 1920 and then 1930, 1940. Things like that, ages, addresses, who's living in the household. Those are some of the kinds of things you have to check so that you know that you have the right John O'Brien.
Right. And I'm sure, that's one of the major challenges, right? When you have those names that are just so common. In New York, it's Martinez, and O'Brien.
Yes, exactly.
you get both of them.
Exactly. And I would also add, don't be afraid to hire another professional. I have had to hire a person in another country when the search goes overseas.
Sure.
I may have a little bit of knowledge in that particular language or knowledge of how those record sets work, but I don't have the gift of gab in, say, Polish, where I can convince a parish priest, can you please look this up for me? I'm trying to track this person's great-grandmother or what have you. Yeah. So there are times when it is appropriate to reach out to someone else, even trained genealogists. As you know, investigations is a very large field. None of us is an expert in anything. So reach out to someone when you need the help.
Yeah. So that's why, like the World Association of Detectives and
exactly.
even NALI and NCISS, like these are good resources to tap into the folks and the things that you can't do, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So always being a part of those associations is really, really important. So what do you think about these Ancestry.com and the DNA samples and all that? Like, how has that affected your work? Does it make things easier? Or is it more of a challenge? Like, what's the professional opinion on these things?
Oh, well, it's fabulous that there are giant databases online like Ancestry.com, another one that is provided for free through the Church of Latter-day Saints, the Mormon religion, which is FamilySearch.org.
Right.
I urge anyone to check that out. In the old days, and this is before my time, but you'll get the old timers telling me I had to just, schlep to every single repository and go in the basement and look things up in dusty old books. Well, we've got a great wealth of things online now. However, I always want to add, not everything is online. That is definitely true. There's still a lot of things that are not online. But I think, Matt, that there is a perception out there that, it's all online. You can just sit in front of the computer, get it done. That's not true. There are times you have to reach out. Another reason to reach out to a professional to go and get a record that is not online. So just because it's not online doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And that involves another skill set, trying to find those records and get somebody to get to them if they're in another area.
So is like DNA a reliable resource? Is that something the court recognizes as an acceptable proof of relationship?
I have not had to use that. That's an interesting question you ask. I worked for an attorney some years ago, and he was not sure of the identity of this person that died. He was trying to prove it, though the records were scant. I'm assuming he came from another country. So he had hair from this deceased man's hairbrush and said, I'm going to have this tested if I have to.
Creepy.
A little. Not to me because it's my field,
right.
But it can be done. And in the several years since I've heard of that case, that technology has come a tremendous way. So I have not had to use that yet in an heirship case. There are other cases where I've used DNA. I help adoptees identify their biological parents and vice versa. Right. And DNA is absolutely essential in those areas.
Yeah, that was my next question, right? And how does that work on adoption cases? That is a tool, I guess, at that particular point then, right?
Yes. Over the last several years, that has emerged as an amazing tool. So when you say Ancestry, Ancestry.com also has a DNA database. There are other leading companies out there. A lot of your listeners have probably seen the TV ads, especially around the holidays. Sure. 23andMe, MyHeritage, a little bit lesser known. They have their own genealogy database. You can also do a DNA test through them. So there are several of them out there. All of these major companies are extremely reliable. So if someone gets a result and says, oh my gosh, I have a half sibling, what happened there? Could this be a mistake? And the answer is most often no, right. Because all of these major services use very reliable labs, and the chance of that result being a mistake is possible, but very, very small.
Right, mom or dad has some explaining to do.
Yes.
We're going to have that rough conversation.
Oh, yes. I had one recently where I ended up not having to take the case because the mother in the family confessed, okay, I had an affair during my marriage to your father. Okay, you got me. Right. Finally, when they showed her the DNA results, that's it. That the proof is in the pudding, and this is really your half sibling. Yeah.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
So tell me, in relation to, I guess, criminal cases, like what's the actual process used to find an adoptee or to track a criminal or anything like that?
Sure. So let's take it from the perspective of an adoptee. That person wants to know who their biological mother and father are. They would do the test, which involves either very simple, some companies have you spit into a tube, or you do a cheek swab with a big long Q-tip, basically, and send it in. And then voila, after a few weeks or months, your results pop up online. Looking at this can be very intimidating to someone who doesn't know what to make of it or how to interpret the results. That said, I'm not a scientist by any stretch of the imagination. So there are a lot of resources online, a lot of free resources online that can also help you figure this out. But if you don't want to use the time to figure it out, you want to hire a professional, that's something that you can do. So what happens in brief is your results get posted and your closest relatives who have also tested will show up. And if your biological parent has tested or a half sibling, that person would potentially pop up. In some cases, you may just get a second or a third cousin. You can then look at all of these results, and hopefully people whose results, those that relate to you, hopefully they will cooperate. Say, my name is Jane Jones, and then you start to say, okay, so one of my birth parents' names was Jones, and then you start to document a tree and build a tree and figure out where you fit in that tree and reduce the probabilities until you can figure out, well, okay, there are 3 brothers here. One of them was my biological father. Right. And then comes the tough part, as you say, using Jedi mind tricks, is to contact that family potentially and say, I've got some questions to ask, and will you do some additional DNA testing to narrow down who might be my mother or father?
So have you ever come across, I'm sure the answer is yes, but you have these situations where you actually have to vet somebody, right? They're interested in having some sort of research done. Are there ethical standards or certain times where you say like, I'm not so sure I should be finding this person, or, like something seems a little fishy to me. Have you ever come across that situation?
Do you mean in terms of DNA specifically?
Well, DNA or just air research or the type of research that you do. Where do you draw the line where it's like, I don't think I should be doing this?
In terms of air search, I rarely run into that problem because I know it's a real case. The case comes from an attorney, and he or she has been hired on to resolve the problem. So I don't resolve the problem, meaning trace the heirs. So that's not usually a problem. In terms of DNA, yes. And as you know, Matt, as all investigators know, there's no ethical book of guidelines for us to follow.
Sure.
There's nothing spelled out as a condition of getting our licenses, so we have to use our best judgment.
Sure.
So I'll give you a quick example. I had one woman who contacted me who said, I'm almost positive this woman is my birth mother. I have contacted her, calling, writing letters, whatever it may be, 2 or 3 times, and she has said she wants nothing to do with me, but I want to do a DNA test, and I want you to actually do the work and make sure she is my biological mother. I have a problem with that.
Sure.
I'm assuming that she has some records, and she is probably correct in assuming this is her biological mother, and this woman wants to be left alone.
Sure.
So for me to actually confirm that address and continue to fuel that fire, I don't feel good about that.
Yeah, listen, if that person shows up and all of a sudden there's an altercation and there's some violence,
exactly.
You don't want to be held responsible for that.
But between 2 women, probably not. But but absolutely, there could be other cases where that could be the result. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And just the anguish that would be caused by a woman not wanting to have a part of that child's life, which we may say on the surface that's sad, but we don't know the circumstances of that conception. It could have been an assault. Yeah, so you've got to be sensitive around that and not force someone who doesn't want to take part.
Yeah, so you're talking about ethics and what's right and what's not right. I have seen or heard just in the industry of people that do a lot of this locate work, and I try to stay away from it. Right, I work with personal injury attorneys, like that's my space. I had a personal injury attorney the other day contact me and said, "Hey, I'd like to do something personal for me. I had a secretary that worked for me before 9/11. I think she's okay, but I'd like to find her and make sure she's okay." And I'm like, yeah, I'm not doing that.
Or you may say, I'll do that and contact the woman and say, here is Mr. Client's phone number. You can contact him or not.
Right.
Okay. That's it. And yep, she's fine, but I'm not giving you her address.
So you're bridging the gap on my question here, because that's where I was going with it, right? So the industry, I guess, chatter about this stuff is, if you're going to take on these types of cases, you find the person and then you contact them and say, I've been hired by so-and-so who is looking for you. Would you like that person to contact you, or would you like to contact them? Here's their contact information. The general consensus from what I've been told is that's the way to approach this stuff. So what is your feeling on that?
I would agree, especially where a woman is involved. This could be a domestic violence situation.
Right.
You always want to ensure the other person's safety because, look, most of us have families. We all have to, pay the rent and so to speak,
Sure.
and put the food on the table.
Yep.
But do you feel good about giving out that person's information? As I said, especially if it's a woman, do you feel good about that? Maybe not having fully vetted the potential client. We just don't know. So I'm in agreement with that.
Yeah.
As long as the client's okay with it, as long as they understand up front, I'm not giving you that person's information.
Exactly, right. To me, it's a hornet's nest. I don't touch any of that stuff just by choice, right?
But
they're
best to not even do that. But
Right.
but if you have to do it, that's how I would handle it also. Yes.
Right. Okay, so we've covered a couple of unusual cases. So let's dig in a little more. Tell me a couple of things that didn't turn out the way you thought they were going to turn out. Or just
come on.
unusual.
No, I have 110% batting record here, don't we all? Come on.
All right, Ted
gosh.
Williams, relax. let's go.
I am from Boston, so despite my lack of accent. Let me think. In terms of not being able to resolve the case, or
Well, no, not resolving, but maybe it turned out differently than you thought it will. Like you went in saying, okay, I'm going to do my research and this is what I'm going to find. And then at the end of the day, what ends up happening is something completely different than what you initially thought.
Okay. Well, this one's a little bit sad, but I was contacted by an attorney. This was several years ago. This woman, her husband had died, and she said, I think that my husband may have children out there, but I'm not sure. And the attorney felt, we need to investigate this in case the birth children of this man would inherit anything. And I said, okay, she said, there's not a lot to go on. I said, okay. So I had numerous conversations with this very lovely older lady who told me some rather incredible stories, but being newer at the business,
Right.
maybe hoping for a little excitement in my life,
Right.
I bought them hook, line, and sinker because she was extremely convincing.
Right.
She told me that her late husband had broken out of prison, that he had some involvement with a motorcycle gang and had firebombed the headquarters of this motorcycle gang, and they were out to get him back in the day, and
Wow.
call this guy, he'll verify it's true. And I just got sent in circles by various people who, like that children's game telephone, one kid tells
Sure,
a story to the next, to the next. Okay, so they had all heard the same stories and all assumed they were true and just couldn't verify them. And by the time I was done, I realized that probably this poor lady had some mental health issues,
Right.
and either the late husband made up some stories which later got conflated in her mind,
Right.
or perhaps she conflated them herself. And I realized that it turned out there were no children out there, to the best I could determine. But it was a really wild ride, and I spoke to some crazy people.
Yeah, I mean
So
that's
it was entertaining.
That's the fun of the field work, right? Yeah, you
yes.
definitely get those, right? And then you get the story, and it feels like somebody read a script somewhere and just like started, telling that as their own experience, right?
Oh, no kidding. No kidding.
They're really
Very
good,
convincing.
really good script floating around somewhere.
So I was able to resolve the case, but had I known back then, if I heard that same story today, I'd cut some corners and be more prone to question whether that was true or not.
Sure.
But again, she was very convincing, and I guess I was in need of entertainment.
Sure. Let's talk a little bit about, so like I'm the investigator here. I get an attorney that calls me and says, I need to do a next of kin search. I need you to find, this family, all the relatives and everything. You're like, okay, I'm going to go to TLO or Delft Point or, IDI, and I'm going to do my research, or Scope Now, whatever. And, you run through, and sometimes you get the information, sometimes you don't. And sometimes you want to do something thorough. So it's always been like my practice. I'll do that, right? And I'll say, this is what we've come up with so far. However, I recommend a genealogist is the way to go if you're really serious about doing this research and doing it like full extent, this is what I recommend. And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't, right? Sometimes it's like, I don't really care to do all that, pay for all that research, right? I just want to do something, a piece of paper in my hand that I can show the judge and say, yeah, we did our due diligence. And I think sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't.
Sometimes it does. You're right. Yeah.
So, and that's, I have engaged you, or at least connected dots with attorneys that I do work with in those situations. Cause it's like, okay, this is out of my pay grade here. Now we got to hire somebody, to come in and do this. So, having that resource, somebody who does something like you do, I think is really, really important. I think a good investigator, like we were talking about earlier, know your limitations and know when to call in reinforcements, essentially. So do you get a lot of referral work from other investigators? Interestingly,
I've not gotten a lot of referral work from other investigators. It mainly comes through attorneys. I'm certainly happy to talk to investigators. And if investigators have even a quick question here or there, they want to learn a little about genealogy or learn how they can learn about it, I'm more than happy to talk to them. You bring up a fascinating point, because I was also going to say that it seems that genealogists are hesitant to use private investigators.
Right.
Which fascinates me. Yeah. I took an advanced DNA course at a genealogical institute in Pittsburgh last summer. And the woman who was teaching, I was talking about tracing your family through DNA and using some of those freebie websites like Zaba Search. Okay, look, we won't get you sued here, but in my experience, a lot of times, or some of the times, those results are outdated or incomplete because you get what you pay for.
Run disclaimer. We got to run disclaimer. Hold on.
Okay. That's the most I'm going to say about it, in my personal opinion. Right. So I raised my hand and I said, hey, I'm not looking for business here because I only work directly for attorneys, but how about hiring a private investigator? Because rather than relying on those sites, you can have an investigator use a legitimate proprietary database, such as some of the ones you just described, Matt, and get a current mailing address, possibly a phone number, a social that can be used to track them. And she just looked at me, the instructor, who's very accomplished in this area, and just kind of went, huh, and then just continued on with the lecture.
Yeah,
it's like,
it's crazy.
Can we all work together, please?
Yeah, I think there's that stigma, right? Here's the retired police officer who's, his ex-wife is suing him, and he's always out at the bars, and the way Hollywood portrays investigators. I think sometimes people get that in their head that it's it's not the resource to go with, which is just nonsense.
Right, but as we all know, and we're coming full circle because we started this conversation off by saying this is such a broad field. Yeah. There's room for all of us in investigations, and there are many, many different subspecialties. And I would definitely call that retired cop if I had some interviewing to do or fraud case or something, because I don't deal with that at all.
Yeah,
and I would hope that person might call me if he needed to track someone's history.
Yeah, and that's the thing. We all have our skill sets and things that we excel at. I mean, that's really the spirit of the show here, right? Getting the perspectives of different investigators out there, learning, how they do what they do. So it's there's so many different types of subsets out there. It's endless in our field. It seems that way. So how do folks get a hold of you if they had any questions or wanted to talk about their family with you?
Sure. I have a website, which is Healy-Miller.com, Healy Miller.com. No hyphen in there. There's a hyphen in real life, but not on the website. Gotcha. And that will list all of my contact information. I should note, too, though, there are a handful of genealogists, a very small number, who do also have, as I do, also are designated PIs. And I think it's a great advantage.
Sure.
And it's brought me into a fantastic community.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I enjoy seeing you down at the SPY events.
I'll see you here.
I know you come down. So I don't know, Forlini's, I think, is gone. It's gone the way of the ghost. So we're going to have to find a new venue.
They're talking about setting up outdoor tables, so don't count them out yet. But
all right, we'll see. Hey, listen, if they have,
we'll find a place to meet. That'll be the least of our problems.
Yeah, and they've been doing a good job, SPY, actually, with having the virtual events. Yes. It's been really cool. So I feel like they should ask you to teach an event, like you could really do a great webinar and this stuff. That's really cool stuff. So, hey, Leisa, thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure. It's been fun.
It's been in the back of my mind to get you on and do a spot for a while. So I'm glad that the stars lined up and we were able to get this done. So
absolutely.
Yeah, thanks. So thank you everybody for tuning in, and make sure you actually tune into Thursday's episode too, the quick hits. We're doing extra episodes every week now for leading into osmosis. So definitely want to check out that extra content. Yeah, we'll catch you guys next week on the next regular show. So take care, guys. Have a good day.
What a great show today. Leisa will definitely be back to talk more about DNA. Thanks so much for tuning in. We also want to thank Crosstracks, the PI Institute for Education, and InvestigatorStoolbox.com for sponsoring the show. Remember, it only takes 41 cents a day to unlock the future of investigations. Make an investment in your business and yourself today. The 25% legacy discount won't last long. Got a question or comment about the show? Email Matt at matthews@satellitepi.com. You can also find him on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. We want your feedback to bring you the best shows possible. Our next show is a quick hit segment with Brian Pate from BabelStreet.com. We discussed the black market living on the internet. Check out the episode this Thursday. We'll be back on Monday with another regular show featuring New York-based workman's comp attorney Sachin Gad. Stay safe out there, everyone.